I'm Tanya Fox, and you're listening to Fox Talks Business Podcast. I started my career in the corporate world, but always played to my own tune and loved to think outside of the box. This didn't always serve me well with the bosses, so I made the decision to become an entrepreneur. And that little seed of entrepreneurial curiosity continued to grow as I branched out into retail, service, and franchise businesses. Now, I have been fortunate to have amazing successes in the last 2 decades, but they did not come without some really big failures and even bigger lessons learned. And that's why I started this podcast, not just to share the failures, but to show you how you can turn every failure into a success. We're going to hear from some amazing humans from around the world that are going to share their stories of the good, the bad, and the motivational entrepreneurial life has to offer. After all, life is too short to make all of the mistakes yourself, so why not learn from each other? And of course, we're going to have some fun, because as I always say, well, you know what? I'll tell you that at the end of the episode. Hello, Foxy listeners. I'm excited for this episode because we're going to be talking about life and death. And I'm not going to give you any more into that because I really want you to tune in to listen. My guest today is Jodi Wellman. Jodi, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited to be chatting with you.
So talk to us a little bit about how you got onto this path, and then also tell everybody what this path is.
Happily. I like, by the way, how you have really created a cliffhanging kind of like, what are we talking about? And well, yes, life and death. I got myself super curious about this idea of the fact that, wait a minute, could our mortality be a motivator to actually live like we mean it? And so I'll skip to the end to put it in context that yes, in fact, the answer is yes. And I started 4,000 Mondays, my company, because we roughly have 4,000 Mondays to live. And to your first question about, like, I got into this because I don't know about you, but I've always been fascinated by this bizarre reality that we're all walking around living in the world that we know we're not going to be here forever. And we know we have this finite amount of time. And isn't that weird? I mean, it's absurd. And we're trying so hard to make the best of these years. And that's a noble mission. And yet, wow, we're all careening towards an inevitable end. And you got to kind of giggle about it. Like, it's crazy. We're all in this crazy lot together.
Yeah. So even if you're living to die.
Right. And so then my thought is, well, can we amplify the living, so that we really make the most of it? Because I don't know about you, but we tend to take it for granted, So there were a couple of motivators along the way for me. My mom died early in her 50s, and that kind of woke me up to, whoa, we need to kind of get down to the business of getting on with things. And when I was studying positive psychology for my grad school program at the University of Pennsylvania, that for me was what cracked it open. Because I don't know, I guess I needed the permission that, if this is a studied area, then this is legit. And so now I'm allowed to talk about this because there is such a thing as temporal scarcity, which really allows us to look at our lives in a very finite way and then believe that our lives are more valuable because they're limited. So those were really kind of that's kind of what got me into this, the awareness that this is ridiculous. And then my mom, and then obviously studying it in school. That's how this all cracked open for me.
Well, and I think everybody has kind of those moments in their life where they're like, am I, and we hear it so much, like, are you living your best life and all of that other stuff. And I remember, being younger, in my 30s, I would say, and people asking like, oh, what does your mom do? And I'm like, oh, her and my dad are just like, they live on a boat and they're just sailing. And they're like, oh, wow. Like, so you come from money. And I'm like, oh, they don't have 2 pennies to rub together. And I always remember like just having conversations with my dad and going like, how did you do it? Like, how did you just jump? And he was like, I just don't want to have any regrets. Like, I would rather say I did it and failed than to say I never did it and I don't know how it was going to work out. And he's like, and what's the worst that's going to happen? We have to come back and live with you because we don't have any money left. I was just like, I remember sitting there thinking at first, like, that's really stupid. That's not how you live your life. And then letting it sink in and going, yeah,
And so it really, for me, helped me to change my perspective on like how I jumped into things. Cause I was like, really, what's the worst that's gonna happen? Like, I'm not gonna let myself tank and be homeless. Like, I'll step out if I need to. But we have that fear, right? That fear of like, well, what if, but we never
Yes.
think like, how much time is left? Like, what if I just run out?
Oh my gosh. I am so downright giddy by everything you're saying. First of all, high five to your parents. And it is such a good testament too, that it's not that you need to be loaded in order to live the life that sounds kind of cool. And isn't it funny how in society we do have these notions about what is responsible and what is not? And so many of us do long to do these cool things, but we don't tend to take action on them because there is this kind of bizarro belief that, well, I'll have time to do it later. Maybe when I retire, well, that's the biggest joke in the world because, first of all, you might not make it. Second of all, your body might not want to actually let you sail around the world. And third of all, who knows what can get in the way? So yeah, that spirit of just go for it. Of course, within reason. We're not all looking to quit our jobs, although that's lovely, but within reason.
Well, and I think, so talk to us about how you got to like the 4,000 Mondays. Like, cause I think that's a thing that people, even initially I was like, oh, 4,000 Mondays, that's a lot. And then I was like, I went onto the computer and I did the little calculator. I'm like, okay, how many weeks have I been alive? And for me, it was like 2,387 weeks and 4 days. And I was like, wow. Like, I know my age. I'm not stupid. Like, I know what general life expectancy is. I know what my age is, but like, even kind of doing that math, I was like, I'm over the halfway mark. Even though I knew it, I was like, it really made me go, what else do I want to do?
Yes. Thank you. You are a perfect case study in the moment of exactly what I want to have happen as a result of that. And we are tapping into psychology, right? Which is this idea about scarcity. And usually it's funny because usually coaches are all about, we should talk about abundance and not scarcity. Yeah. But the only thing is, as humans, we're more motivated by the idea of what we have to lose and then fixing that than the idea of what we have to gain. So this is the premise of all of it is like, I love a good countdown timer. I find myself motivated by that. It's not for everybody. That's cool. You go do your thing. But if 4,000 is the average that we get, and luckily, by the way, as females, we do get a little more than 4,000, but we're splitting hairs here. But this math, this very important math, I call it like the most important math you can ever do in your life is that countdown. And that is the thing that does put it in the perspective. Because we are wired to adapt. These aren't faults that we have that are, character flaws. This is just born in us that we get swept up in our routines. And the next thing we're all these dreams and hopes and goals and ideas and cool things we might want to do. We do defer to that sort of someday I'les. We do believe we'll get to do it later, or we just actually, quite frankly, don't dream enough or give ourselves permission to dream about the neat things that might make a life worth living. But yeah, when you see that number dwindling every single week, it does create the little spark underneath the behind to get moving on some of those things.
Well, and I think we forget about it. I mean, even just the other day, I was thinking like my son is 16 and I kind of looked at him and I was like, where right? That saying that the days are long, but the years are short. And I was like, I never felt that more where I'm like, geez, like he's talking about moving out and all of that other stuff. And I'm like, like I still feel the same as I did when he was younger, even though I know that my body is not quite cooperating in the same amount of ways. But I do think it's like, that a lot of people think, well, this is like, when like at the beginning, when I said like life and death, they think like, well, I don't want to talk about death. Like that goes along with like religion and politics. And like, you just don't talk about that stuff. But I think it's true because even if you want to put it in something that's like not as touchy of a subject, like if you're short on money for say groceries, somehow you find a way to eat. Like you just manage to figure it out. So why not look at this that way of going, I only have so much time left. So all those things I want to do, I just have to figure out a way to do them that might not be, exactly pinpointed the way it was like, 15, because I don't do stuff the same 15 years ago. I'm like, yeah, let's just get to it. Let's move along.
Yeah. Your analogy is so cool. You're right about the money thing. And you are right too about how people don't want to talk about death. I mean, we're not idiots. It's like, if I could choose to talk about something better, I would. However, again, we do need that little poke in the ribs. I am trying to defang the death. I recognize that the more we can accept it, the easier it is to have conversations and to get real about how, about it. But again, my crusade isn't so much about accepting the end. I think we do get it. And I don't care whether we choose to talk about it and plan a living will or not. Well, I do care, but I just want all of this, though, is in service of doing exactly what you're talking about, which is because we know it's going to end. And, you know, for me, it's 1,890 Mondays to go, hopefully more, but maybe less. Wow. Like I want to get down to business. I want to do these things that I have listed. And, you know, I guess something you just said a second ago made me think, like, I believe that it is all too tempting for us to just let like the feeling of like time passing us by. So to your point about how all of a sudden you're realizing that, you know, your son's older, and that's the part that scares me the most. And I call that like, I want us to live squander-free lives, I say, because I am very guilty of it, you know, squandering. All of a sudden, you know, it's like, where did January go?
Mm-hmm.
What, you know, that notion of not what do I have to show for it? And I don't mean in a showy way. I actually feel really against that. It's not about what other people think of how you razzle dazzle spent your month or your life, but really getting deliberate with planning it and saying, what would be really cool to do this year? Or even this month. And then in a grander scape, like this life, so that if I got to the end, I wouldn't feel like, man, I always wanted to spend a year of my life sailing and I didn't, you know? So I'm always sort of like hypervigilant, like, let's stop and actually plan it.
Well, and I think living in those moments, like that's what I want. Like, I just want to go, yeah, I lived, I laughed, I loved, I do it all over again. Like, and so it's that striving of going like, you know, that I find now in my life, I sit when I'm, you know, making a big decision, I kind of go, you know, if I do this, I wonder if I'd want to do this again. And there's still some moments where I'm like, not doing that again. I would skip that part.
You're reminding me, there's this thought exercise by Nietzsche, the philosopher, called The Eternal Return. And in one of his writings, he poses this question, which it can be really rankling. And it's that, you know, imagine for some strange, bizarre reason, you are in a situation where you have to live your exact life over and over and over and over and over again for all of eternity. Every single boring moment, amazing moment, high, low, oil change, prom, like all the things. And the question, he said, is that either this dawning of awareness for you will either crush you because you realize like, oh my gosh, my life has been horrible. I don't want to do this again for the rest of eternity. It'll delight you, or it'll just kind of make you, you know, maybe be neutral. And I like that on a daily basis sometimes, right? Like if there's another thought of, you know, if you had to live yesterday, same thing, kind of like a weird twist of fate, you have to live that day over and over again, Groundhog Day. Would you want to live it? And I think it's too much pressure to have one day be the day that gets repeated, you know, but at the same time, it's a good exercise to get you thinking, am I living in a way that I would actually feel like your dad did at the end? Man, I did it. I killed it. And I'm proud of it. And there is research that shows there's a direct relationship between anxiety towards death and the extent that we feel that we have lived our lives. So people feel more anxious as they age about death when they feel like there's life left unlived inside them. Whereas people feel like your dad, like, you know what? I rocked it. I did so many cool things. Great. Yeah, could I have done more? Sure. But I feel really good about it. They tend to feel way cooler about the idea of the bon voyage.
Well, and I think like, truthfully looking back, he was so peaceful in something that shouldn't have been peaceful. Like even the doctors were like, we're going to have to put him into a coma because if this, you know, if what, and I can't even remember the terms, but if this thing bursts, if all of a sudden this goes sideways, it's excruciating pain and there's nothing we can do to touch it. And I remember being very fearful because of course my mom, like I'm worried about my mom. She's like by his bedside. And like, it's just bizarre to me that, you know, we worry about this, but we also have the choice to choose how we live and how we go. And if you can just take that breath and just kind of go, yeah, it's okay. I'm good. You know, that's for me anyway, that's the ultimate goal.
Oh, I am so loving my conversation with you. First of all, I want to do this. Can we make it like a 24-hour conversation in a row? Because I just love this. And your so many things. First of all, your dad's equanimity. I haven't heard a story that was this kind of this perspective about being okay with it. So I love that. I'm sorry that you've lost your dad, and yet I love how he chose, how, I don't know if he chose to that attitude or if he kind of always embodied that sort of a play it cool kind of guy. But then transitioning to your point about how we do have choice about how we live, that is something that I find intoxicating. And that's where in the study of positive psychology, I find it really, really alluring that, of course, genetics and circumstance will shape a lot of our environment and a lot of our, degree to which we can have happiness or life satisfaction. But research is clear that a full 40% of our perceived life satisfaction is completely within our control. And then what that comes down to is, are you designing your day and your week and your month and your year in such a way that it actually is giving you a fighting chance at being happy and making the most of your time? And what that means is not letting it all of a sudden be another Tuesday that just floats away because you did some work and then you ate some dinner and watched some TV. And believe me, some of those, I do that most days of the week. It can be lovely. Or how do you spice up your life and add in just a little bit more without the pressure to, again, have it be for show or to do too much? It's all relative to what jazzes you up, but there are a bunch of ways that we can make life livelier, right? It could be let's try a totally different cuisine tonight. Let's order something really different in, or let's watch a crazy documentary that we would never normally watch. Or, you know what, let's go buy a trampoline and go do that tonight. Or these are just a bunch of silly examples, but this usually is how this goes, right? Finding just unique, silly, often cheap and cheerful ways to spice up your days, your weeks, your months. That is really the easy peasy secret to living a life worth living.
Well, and I think so often that we, are looking for some monumental, long time moment of joy or happiness or something, that makes you laugh. And it's so funny because often my son will be like, the dumbest things make you laugh. And I'm like, yeah, but I just learned that I need to laugh every day to feel like it's a good day. So if doing something silly, every now and then he'll be talking to me in the kitchen, he's getting all serious, and I'll turn around and try to make the weirdest face I can. And he just looks at me and he's like, oh my God, you're so weird. And he'll walk away, but I hear him giggling and I'm like, it just took him out of that moment. Sometimes you just need to take yourself out of the moment and see something that's so stupid that you're just like, oh my God, you're an idiot. But all of a sudden that tiny little giggle just seems to just change.
Okay.
And it's a ripple effect.
Oh, it does. Okay. So let me tell you, I'm going to get nerdy. There's research and it's called the broaden and build effect. And it's this idea, again, back to positive psychology, that if you can put yourself in a positive emotional state, and there are a bunch of low-hanging fruit emotions, right? So one of them might be amusement, right? Like what you've just said, which is just giddy, silly, fun, stupid stuff. Some of it might be inspiration or serenity or love or joy or interest, sparking curiosity. Basically, we have the ability to usually get ourselves into that state. And I've just recently found a website called explore.org. And for you and any of the people listening right now, I think I've improved your life, but I also think I've ruined it, because if you like watching animals, basically being a weird surveyor of animals, I spent a lot of time yesterday looking at cats in cat shelters, just walk around and bathe each other and sleep. This is probably alarming. Anyways, the point of this is that you can watch a funny video, or you can read an inspiring story, or you can go research a really cool topic that interests you, or you can, have a fun, watch bloopers for Seinfeld reruns or whatever does your thing. You can do that for just a couple minutes of your existence, and it can shift your reality, literally your affect. And this is where the broaden and build theory comes in, is it literally broadens your perspective of how you see and incorporate information, which allows you to have a better, healthier, wider perspective. And then that allows you to build resources that let you flourish. Versus if you're in a crappy mood and you're interacting with somebody in your life, like your son, or you're in a crappy mood or just a neutral mood and you're starting off a meeting at work or whatever, don't expect fabulous outcomes, right? So why not shift yourself doing something goofy or silly or inspiring or whatever moves you? Just do that for a couple minutes. And that literally puts you on a different path for the next, 20 minutes, 1 hour of your life. Again, these are all things within our control.
Well, and I love that you said it, because one of my favorite pastimes is watching animals and just making up stories of what they're saying to each other. And my son and I have spent hours watching we have this like little family of squirrels, and we just like, we'll literally be sitting in the window, and my husband's always like, you guys are really weird. And as they're running, we're like narrating what the conversation is that they're having together.
Like a full script,
like
a
whole full out script. We've done it with like birds that are flying. Like I'll never forget this one time where my son, we're in the car and there was Canadian geese that were flying. Well, I guess other people just call them geese, but there was geese that were flying, and one kept like turning and like going the other way. And all of a sudden from the back seat, my son's like, Harriet, this isn't the way. Why didn't you look at a map? Come on, Frank, don't tell. Like he's having this whole conversation with these two birds. So now I'm watching out the window at this like story playing. And at the time, I kind of laughed, and I sort of left it because we were heading for something that was like serious. But afterwards, I realized, this small thing that I started with my son when he was kind of younger was just to pass boredom for myself. And it brought myself, like, I mean, I find myself funny, so it brought me amusement. But I realized that, these little moments that we do, although they change how we think, it almost can change people's personality. Yes. Because you look at things, I look at things differently. I look at two squirrels running differently. It makes me smile now. It's something now that sort of brings me joy, and I giggle over this silly little moment of making up, this weird story. What these animals are. I do it with my dog all the time. Like, I'm like, this is, and I'll literally talk for her. Like my son will look at her and I'll be like, I really want a cookie. Oh, and why won't you give me a cookie? Like, and he's never paying attention to me. He's just looking at the dog. Like it's these, so that all started from like creating stories of animals. And I think it's, it spurs my imagination. It causes us to sit and have conversations. I still get the shake of a head because he's 16 and everything mom does is silly, but I'm positive he's doing that on his own when he goes out.
Yes. And like you said the other day when he was saying what you did was silly, but then you heard him chuckle. I mean, people are allowed to outwardly present that it's silly or corny or whatever it is. But then, you know what? And here's the thing too, is like, I love the idea that you are also influencing people around you, but let's just get super selfish for a sec. Like we're talking kind of about our lives. And if it gives you amusement, now I realize sometimes your amusement's contingent on whether or not someone else has laughed at your joke or you're a little silly, but are you in a moment where if you're looking at a couple birds, does that still give you joy? Or, you're narrating what's going on in your dog's head right now. If it can help you in that moment feel just a little bit amused or just a little, whatever that is for you, that is just a micro example of how, again, we are crafting the life that is just a little bit better than either the boring one or the one where, again, quite frankly, it's like, we just don't give a darn. Because that's the way that if I want to be extreme about it, and I think it sounds judgmental, I don't mean for it to, but the difference between like giving a care, and if I could swear, I would say the S word. And I talk about giving 2 S's, like giving 2 craps about our life, because it does take a little bit of effort, admittedly, to end up at the end of a month, for example, or a day or a week, feeling like, wow, that was fun or cool. It's usually because you had to initiate something and make something happen, right? You had to say, it would be cool to go to that concert. And you had to actually buy the ticket, or you had to get up and go, even on a Friday when you just felt like staying in, right? Or plan the travel or save the money to go and do the tour or whatever that is. It's not glamorous. And I guess sometimes I just wish it was easier and more fun. But making a fabulous life happen does require conceiving of, well, what might be neat to do, and then actually putting it in the calendar. And that can seem boring, but then at the end of when you have dinner out at the neat new restaurant in town that has that really cool Spanish tapas that you never would have tried, and you come home and it's a fun night and you're glad you went, that's worth the effort of giving two craps, right?
Well, and I think just taking an opportunity also to figure out, like, even what's in your wheelhouse. I remember over, when we were in the lockdowns and stuff, like all of a sudden people had, like, all in my neighborhood would have like cityscapes in their window. So there was like New York and like Paris. And so every time you drove by the house and the lights were on, you would see this like silhouette. And it brought people so much, like, construction paper, black construction paper brought so much joy to people, because like, I remember being like parking in front of the house and being like, my son's like, what are we doing? And I'm like, we're having French fries in Paris. Like, but it was such a simple thing, because of course, one, we couldn't, but I was like, I'm not going to fly anybody to Paris to eat French fries because they're not even French. But like, I think it was a targeted effort of mine to create a memory, even though I didn't have the money at the time to create, the whole experience of going. And I think sometimes we get stuck in feeling like it has to be the all.
Oh my gosh. Targeted effort is exactly it. And I think you're right too, that we're so all or nothing, right? Like either it's got to be a really neat, big, epic trip, or I'm just home alone. Like you could also conjure up on a random Thursday, open up a really crazy, fun, expensive bottle of wine for no reason other than it's just a random Thursday, and pull out the good dishes and sit cross-legged at the coffee table and put pizza on it because you ordered in your favorite pizza, and play music from high school that you used to listen to, and like have just these are moments, right, that we can sculpt. And so you are right. Plan targeted, theme night stuff that, again, I think we felt pushed to the brink. COVID, there were lots of gifts amidst that pandemic that got us to be a little bit creative amidst the insanity. And so your example is amazing about having French fries in Paris, but with an asterisk at home.
Yeah. Well, so, we've talked about a lot of it. Let's talk about, maybe some habits that can be dangerous of people doing, because I think there's always that, that other side.
Well, one of the things that comes to my mind are the ideas of habits and routines. And I know that they are really fabulous if you're trying to initiate something healthy, right? Like creating a habit of going to the gym or whatever that might be for you that's actually positive. Okay, so don't stop that. But I contend that, and this actually goes back to some old school famous philosophers that do say that the dulling routines that we get ourselves into do literally dull the edges of our lives. And that is what I believe slips us into autopilot, right? That sort of glazed in the eye. This day is no different from the day before, and it's not going to be much different than tomorrow, because it's the same routine in the morning, the same work. Maybe the day is a little bit different, but generally there's the same come home and make a dinner, come home, go to the couch, or whatever that routine might be.
So like really like you're meaning like over scheduling, like people who are like, okay, I sit down, I take meetings between like 1 and 3 and da, 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 da. Like, and it's just,
that's a good example.
Okay.
Yeah. And even if the meeting, I work with a lot of leaders and their teams where they'll have this Monday morning or Tuesday morning or Friday night meeting, and the meeting is the same. And it's like, wait a sec. We as humans are actually, we don't know we need this as much as we do, but we need novelty. We need to shake up our experiences, whether they are the minor ones, like even, hey, you know what, let's shake it up. This morning, we're going to go out for breakfast before work. What? Go out for breakfast to the diner? Are you kidding? Yes, we're going to shake it up. Or the meeting that we've been having that's been the same agenda for the last gosh knows how many years, we're totally going to shake it up. We're going to begin with the end. And then in the middle, we're all going to go for a walk. And then we're going to come back and like doing things that are different. It could be with literally the moment. It could be with the whole, like the grander sphere of the schedule. It could be with the route that you might normally go for a walk, like completely shake it up. do a walking meditation while you do it, or don't walk, maybe bike or take a totally different route. So I feel like we need to be more self-aware about the things we do when we're kind of these like impressively functioning zombies. Like we just get into this mode of getting stuff done. And of course we need to keep some semblance of routine to achieve things. But the problem, I think, is that we just really slip into that. We take it too literally, and we have to shake it up. And maybe it is that you do the same thing every weekend. Well, you know what? Next weekend, everything's going to get thrown up in the air and you're going to do it completely different. And what would that look like? Like, do you have any routines that you're aware of that might be a little bit ho-hum?
Yeah,
breakfast,
I think like usually it's like the evenings.
Yeah.
Like I need to like shake that, like, and suppers. I think like that's the thing. It was funny. I was saying that last night. I'm like, you know, I had asked my husband, I'm like, can you make supper? And he's like, oh, I don't know what to make. And in my head, I literally went, we've eaten the same shit for 15 fucking years. Like pick one of those meals. Like, and then I realized I was like, okay, I need to shake this up. Cause I used to, when my son was like, we would have like breakfast for supper. And like, there was all of these kind of, you know, supper for breakfast. And, you know, we would change, you know, things up. We would, you know, we would eat something out of an ice cream cone. Like whatever we're making has to be eaten out of an ice cream cone. And I was like, what happened to that night? Like, what can we put on a stick? Like, so I was like, we need to eat something on a stick. I just feel like something on a
Yes. I don't know what it is going to be, but here's the stick. You, by the way, okay, so I did this a doodled calendar for the year. You know how there are like a bunch of silly holidays through the year?
Yeah.
One of the days is eat something on a stick day. I think it's in the middle of the year, but this day has your name written all over it. But I love how okay, by the way, you're highlighting something to me that I'm feeling kind of super passionate about these days. This thing of like, well, we used to do that, you know, we did. And oftentimes we're trying to reinvent the wheel when it's like, let's go back to some of the cool stuff that happened back in the day when you're right. You used to do different meals. You used to try different recipes. I mean, that to me is about, okay, fine, let's just get back on that wagon. And I'm the same as you, by the way. We have the husband over here. We got the same roughly like 10 meals on rotate. Yeah. It feels that way, right? When it's like,
might change up the vegetable,
try different greens. Okay. So shaking so that's a really good example. Maybe it is just the meals, and meals are so important to us. I don't know about you, but I'm happily obsessed with food. And so like, if it means an exciting new recipe or spice that you get to just tinker around with, that, and that again is another example where we often underestimate, oh, what's the big deal? No, you know what? It actually is a big deal. If you know, you're going to have this really fun, different, like crazy casserole fun thing on Thursday, or you're going to do banana splits for dinner on Friday. Like, are you not looking forward to Friday? I am. Can I come over?
Well, and I think it's just those, like, you know, it doesn't have to be like those small moments combined together can create such a different life. Like we do that. We have like a junk night, and it's just randomly somebody will be like junk night. And I get so overjoyed because I'm like, oh, I don't have to make breakfast. I don't have to make any meals. Like, this is awesome. And it's just, night? We just eat like whatever we can find that's in the house, like chips that are left over, or like little hors d'oeuvre. Like nothing makes sense. Like we've had everything from like pizza rolls to like hard-boiled eggs, some pickles on the plate. Like it's just random, whatever you can kind of find, and you have to try. So people will, you know, like some people will put like weird combinations together, and they're like, here, try this, like mayo and peanut butter on a tiny like little baguette. I was like, this is gonna be disgusting. It wasn't like super disgusting, but it was a good change in perspective. But again, looking back, I'm like, that's not something that we do on a regular, like it's so sporadic that we do that anymore, because, you know, to your point of this whole thing, we got stuck in completing every day. What are the tasks that we need to do? Yes. And what haven't we gotten done? And then, well, we're interested in efficiency. We are interested in productivity. And of course, like that train's going to still keep on moving. It's just about adding in a few of the other things. Now you're reminding me too, that like, of course we can take things too far. So if you did junk night, all of a sudden it was every third night. Well, it would lose its luster. Like that's no fun if it's too often. So there's this, we have to kind of
be aware of the pacing, but also just the answer usually is to just incorporate more novel things into the mix. Because there is this thing called the hedonic treadmill where we adapt to all the cool things. We also adapt to the crap things, which is helpful just in terms of, dealing with trauma. But even when great things happen, like even, for example, your parents, when they were sailing, aimlessly, and it was so much fun at first, probably by, day 79, it was not as interesting as day 1 or 2. And so we do have a natural adaptation to the fun and novel and pleasurable things in our lives, which is why we continuously have to kind of adjust whatever that novel thing is that we're introducing. So because that's what keeps it fun. But the point is that we got to give a shit. Like we have to stop and say, what this week ahead, do I want to do a really crazy fun lunch thing? Or do we want to take off an afternoon and go and play hooky? Or what would that look like, right? Look at me, totally being a bad example.
But that's okay, because I think like you said, don't be doing it every third day being like, I can't come in today. But I think it's also like taking a stop in those, moments. And what I got from our whole conversation is even stopping in the moments that you have in an everyday and going, is there something in this moment that I can create a memory out of? Even if it's just sitting on the couch together, can I do something? And it reminded me years ago, we did a thing, and I'm sure it's still on my phone. If I find it, you guys, I'll post it in the blog. But we would do one sentence each. So we would literally just sit around the living room and everybody was allowed to say like one sentence, the most 5 words. And we'd try to create a story. Now, I also have boys in the house. So poop came up and then everybody laughed. But the story is still on my phone. And every now and then I pull it out and I'm like, guys, remember when? And it's dumb. It doesn't make any sense. It would never be published in a book. But it was a stupid moment that we were just all bored and somebody said something and then it just kind of started. And I think it's these little things that when you're in your day, what can I do to create this to be like this memory, something that, is going to be fun, and just keep trying to do that. And then it'll just get bigger. It'll just naturally, you'll turn it into something else.
Yes.
And hopefully not forget.
Right. Like the action of making memories. And sometimes, we don't like, even if it feels a little bit contrived, like tonight, let's do something. Well, not everything's going to be a hit. Some might be misses, but the point is that you're giving it a go. And maybe it is a flop. Just like how I recommend for people who are, all work and no play, go try a new hobby. And people are afraid when you're adults to go try something new because either I might not be good at it or whatever the fear is, which we know, I get it. And it's that, go give it a go. Go to that sketch class. And if after a couple you don't like it, well, I'm a fan of swiftly abandoning it, then move on to something else. But give it a try, because passion, where most of us are just longing for that. Joseph Campbell has this line that is long and prolific, but the key I remember from it is that most of us are just looking for the feeling of the rapture of being alive. And so go find the rapture, like whatever passion that might be. And if you don't have the passion, go take some risks. Go try some new things. Go try a new hobby. Go try a new sport. Go try a new workout, or go try new books, or whatever that might be. But understand that it's going to take risk because you may not like it. And that's absolutely fine and expected. And try, then get back on and try something new again and again and again. And now all of a sudden you have spiced up your life. You probably created some memories as well along the way.
Well, and I think even like, looking back at, is there something that you were like, you've seen numerous times, because we see stuff so much. Is there something that you've looked at and went, that would be like kind of fun? Like, I would like to try that one day and make that one day sometime, this week.
Oh, I encourage people to make lists like that. So there's this exercise. It sounds super basic, but most of us actually have a hard time with it. It's like, knowing what makes you happy, and writing a list out of 30 things that you can do that are sort of small scale, that could actually reasonably be done within a week or month of your life. Not like, I love to take cruises of the Mediterranean. Well, yeah, don't we all? But like, that's not going to happen necessarily right now. So what is an example of something in your realm of existence that really does make you happy, right? For some people it is spending time in the garden, or it's going for a walk with my elderly neighbor, or it's sitting and making crafts or scrapbooking or whatever that thing might be. having the list handy. Now that's doable stuff. What you just said, I like even better as an additional tab, or maybe another page in the journal, however you record stuff. It's of cool stuff that might be neat to do. It may not make the bucket list, but it is a list of things that I'm curious about. And those are exactly like, we forget all of a sudden when we're bored or when we're just feeling a little ho-hum. For some reason, all we're faced with is Netflix, like at least personally. But I work with a lot of clients in the same boat where, what did I say that I wanted to do? If you've got the list, that's the thing that might make you go, oh, right, I was interested in learning how to candle make, or I was interested in starting a podcast or whatever, so that you can give yourself the fodder to take action.
Yeah. And to never be, it always takes me back to my childhood, because I learned very quickly as a child never to say I'm bored, because it only took once that I ended up having to clean underneath the kitchen sink and scrub everything. And then my mom was like, are you still bored? I have other tasks. And I was like, no. So I learned at a very young age to find something to amuse myself. Because if I didn't,
at least never admit it out loud.
Yeah. Well, and I think now in adulthood, it's the same thing. Like, don't be bored or you have to clean.
There's a cool phrase I'll botch, but something about how boredom is the luxury of people who've lost touch with their impermanence. This is right up my alley.
I love
right?
that.
Like, if you knew you only had a year to live, let's just imagine this fun exercise. I am fairly certain that we wouldn't spend much of that year being bored, right? Because we'd be like, stuff it in. Back to the Mediterranean cruise, but also back to macrame, back to all the cool things. Like, let me do it all. Most of us would have that sense. Boredom wouldn't really enter, because we would know that our time was ticking, and we're all back. We're back now to the beginning of our conversation, is that we let things languish, and we let ourselves be bored because we feel like there's going to be time later. And this is the part where I just want to gently but ferociously shake people. Like, yeah, but wait, like, your time is ticking. So is mine. And you may not even have the full 4,000 Mondays. We might get ripped off. So let's get on with it. Right.
I love that. I love that. And I think that is like the perfect message then, with just get on with it. So for those that are interested, I mean, I've been searching through your videos, and you're probably like, why is she looking videos from like 2 years ago? But I just love them all, that I had to dive deeper into them. But let people know where they can find you, like, what do you have going on, and talk to us a little bit too about the quiz that you have.
Oh, okay. Thank you for asking. So pretty much everything is over at 4000mondays.com. There is that calculator there where you can calculate how many Mondays you have left. And there is a quiz that should pop up that will ask you how alive or dead are you? And there are a series of questions that will then tell you kind of where you are, and then give you a guide to being astonishingly alive. So there's the calculator and quiz there. But I love nothing more than speaking and doing workshops with groups and teams, and helping people figure out how to make the most of this finite time we all have while we're here.
Well, thank you so much for spending time with me. This is my happy moment of the day. There was like so many laughs, but I think so many lessons for people. So tell us, just before you go, what is your favorite motto?
Ooh, my favorite motto. Well, my immediate one that comes to mind is don't think, just do. Not to be reckless, but I think we overthink, and then we don't get on with the bit. Back to the thing about let's get on with it. So if there's an inkling and there's a thing you want to do and you're scared, you know what? You can hopscotch over the fear if you just take action.
Yeah. Do it with the passion of a 4-year-old.
Oh, even better.
Nothing stops them, right? Like, it's not a stick, it's a sword. Now it's a cane. Now it's like,
can we roast marshmallows with it?
Yeah.
Too?
Yeah. It could just no fear, right? Like, and if it doesn't work, didn't work.
Love it. Love it.
Thank you so much, Jodi.
Thank you. Such a good chat.
Such a good episode. I love that all of my guests in 2023 are like, let's jump down rabbit holes. And I have just as good conversations with them off air as I do with on air. But I wanted to have this guest because, I said at the beginning that we're going to be talking about life and death. And I know this sometimes can be a touchy subject because people think, that death is a very somber topic to talk about. Nobody wants to think about it. And I'm not asking you to think about that. Like Jodi and I talked through this whole thing. What I would love for you to do is take a moment to just step back and go, am I living the life that I want? And even if you are, even if your answer to that question is, yeah, 100% living the life I want, how can you make it even better? Is there some small thing that you can do to change, something that you can explore? Maybe that's just sitting down and making the list, like she had mentioned, about 30 things that make you happy. Do that today. Just take one small step to go, how are certain ways, how are a few things that I can do to kind of shake up those things that, maybe I'm just kind of going on autopilot with, and take a look and go, is there something I've always wanted to do? Is there something that I was like, one day? Today is the one day. You need to be able to take that plunge. Now, sometimes that can be scary, and I totally get that. And that's why there are people out there that can help you sort of figure out the path to do that thing that you wanted to do. I definitely would love to be one of those people. But I encourage you to also go and take the quiz that's on Jodi's website and see, where do you land on that scale, and get some ideas of how you can sort of pivot, how you can change those ordinary everyday things. I'm very fortunate that I get to do podcasting, and I get to change that dynamic and see different lives. And maybe that's just sitting on your couch and doing what I do and making a narrative for animals that you see running out, or your dogs and cats that are in the house. Do something that's different that makes you smile, because, hey, as I always say, if you're not having fun, why are you doing it?